Well, hello everyone. This is Lab 1. I'm doing it on my Mac. Lalima on the left, GitHub on the right, some PowerPoint slides that I have loaded on Lalima below. No big deal. Question number 1 tells you to go to GitHub and change your Hello World repo name and then add collaborators for your particular ITM 352 repo. I already have an ITM 352 repo. I created a new Hello World, and I'm just going to name it something similar to it, like my plan was ITM 352A repo, but then I spelled it wrong. Such is life. Anyway, go ahead and you can go ahead and rename in settings your repo. And then once that's done, you're going to go over to the collaborators portion in settings, and you're going to add both myself, S-A-ITM, and the TA, V, which I have on the PowerPoint slide. I can't remember right now. She's got a bunch of letters. And you're going to add both of the collaborators right here. Click the green button, type in the names, or type in the user IDs. And once you type in the user IDs, it'll let you go ahead and select the right person. And you'll see for V's here in a second exactly which one it looks like. That's right there. There's V's. Go ahead. Collaborators are in. And then what we have to do is, I already have some URLs posted because I did this in class, if you remember. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete those. Paste in the URL for my new ITM 352 repo. Go ahead and plug it in there. And so now we know what your repo URL is. We'll go on to the next question. Next question says, clone the repo to your local computer in VS Code. And I showed a couple of different ways to do this in class. GitHub, desktop. There's a little link in the VS Code you can click on also, excuse me. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the URL. And because we have already installed Git in our computer, previous video, I'm just going to do git clone and basically pull it in from the GitHub down to my computer. Now, one of the things that's required is you have to go to your account and in VS Code and make sure that you are signed into your GitHub account. Go ahead and give it whatever permissions that VS Code is required to connect to GitHub, and then, as they say in the homeland, bada bing, bada boom, it will actually download GitHub to your computer. And then when you go to the folder section, you'll see that under the wherever it's saved, there's going to be the folder for that repo. Now, in my Mac, I have it going straight to the hard drive. On the PC I showed in class, we had it going to a different area, basically under Documents, GitHub. So the question asks, what is the path to the repo? So you can do a quick pwd, print working directory. Once you're in that repo, copy it, paste it right into Lalima, and you're good to go. And on to the next question. Okay, so on to part 2, we're going to use VS Code. We're going to create web pages. And first thing we're going to do is inside of our Lab 1 folder. Well, first we got to create a Lab 1 folder. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. We could have done it from the command line, but let's just go ahead and do it from the VS File Explorer. Click on that, create new folder, call it Lab 1. Hit enter, and then in there, hit the little icon that creates a file underneath it, and you're supposed to use your last name _ hello. I'm going to use Sal because it's easier to type. salhello.html, and as we discussed in class, you'll notice that because I typed HTML, the computer now thinks it's an HTML file. Now I'm just going to type in plain text. This is Sal, no HTML tags. Make sure you save it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to open this up in a web browser. Now on a Mac, it's a little different than in a PC. If you set up VS Code, you can actually have your VS Code have a browser window. It will literally open up like a browser window so you can test your HTML. I'm going to do that in class later. You saw in the previous video that I just installed VS Code. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to do kind of what we did in class. I'm going to reveal in the Finder, find that particular file, open it, and you'll notice it opens up in a web browser and it shows just this is Sal, but it's plain text. Is this a web page? Absolutely. It's just not a good one because it is a page hosted, well, it's a page hosted on a local computer that is rendered on the local browser. So it's really nothing but ASCII text. And we're going to do some more stuff in the next sections to make it more like a web page that we'll be less embarrassed by, but still embarrassed nonetheless. Okay, so first thing it's going to want you to do is, per the instructions, and I'm kind of skipping ahead here a little, it says basically enclose your this is whatever your name is in between two HTML tags. And then I'm going to get ahead of myself and I'm going to go ahead and put the B tags, and the B for bold. It's no big surprise. I'm also going to throw in italic, the I, and you'll notice because of IntelliSense, as I'm typing it, it kind of gives me the right, hey, here's you opened up with a B, here's a closed B tag. And then I copy or cut my name into it, and I'm going to save. All right, so I'm going to save my file. Then if I go back to my browser page, if I didn't close it, which I did, I'll just go ahead and reveal it in the thing. And now notice in the browser, this is Sal is now bolded and italicized. So is it really any different than the previous page? Other than the fact that there's HTML tags that are transforming what is rendered on the page using the HTML standard. Okay, so why didn't you see the code? Because it's an HTML file, and those HTML and B and I tags are being rendered in the web browser. Okay, on to the next one. It says to go ahead and change that file name to a .txt. And as soon as you do it, if you notice, if you look on my VS Code, all my formatting, intelligent formatting, goes away. And by the way, if you refresh, that file's gone because we renamed it, so you got to make it .txt. And now you see in the browser the HTML, the bold, and the italicized. Why is that? Because it's a text file. It's not an HTML file anymore because it's being rendered as a text file. By having it as TXT, the web page, the browser does not see the HTML tags and do something with it. Now, move on to the next one. We pretty much already did this, right? I did a bold and an italicize, and I guess what it asks you to do is while you're in text, go ahead and type in I, but in my case I did U. The IntelliSense doesn't work for HTML because it's still just a text file. So IntelliSense is going to work for JavaScript, HTML, and other languages in VS Code, but not a text file. Okay, change the file extension back to HTML. Very easy to do. Go ahead and do that there. Oh, gotta put the decimal point there. Yep, and then notice all my formatting comes back, my proper color coding. And then, why do you get IntelliSense help for HTML? Like I just explained, VS Code is designed to work with certain languages like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, etc. So go ahead and answer the question. I mean, I just basically talked about it, and you already know the answer. All you got to do is type it in there, and everything will be fine. Right. Okay, moving on. Using a terminal or command line to access the operating system. So basically what you're going to do is open a terminal, and it's really super simple. This is a Mac, so my file menu is outside. If it's closed like that, you have to go up to the top, find terminal, click new terminal. Default terminal on a Mac is always going to be ZSH, Z shell. Windows is probably PowerShell until you change it. There are different options in there. You got Bash, but ZSH is perfectly fine. It's a lot like Bash. So you can go ahead and what shell is being used. And in a Mac, it's ZSH, and in a PC, probably PowerShell until you change it. And yes, I do recommend for the Windows users, go ahead and make sure you change it to something other than PowerShell. And we'll talk more about that as the semester goes along. PowerShell's great, but it's also very wordy at times. Okay, now the next one, it's just a bunch of commands that you're going to run through. So pwd, for instance, is a print working directory. So what you're going to do is you're going to run through these commands and then just type something in there. So pwd, present working directory, or print working directory. ls is for list. It lists whatever's in that folder you're in. So there's a lab folder as well as a file. Make dir new dir is make a directory called new dir, and then when you list it, you'll see it there. And then if you cd into new dir, you change into that directory, you ls it, there's nothing there. If you're touching a file, you're creating it. If it's not already there, you ls, notice that there's a file there, but it's kind of empty. If you want to rename a file, you move it to the same directory it's in. You don't put a destination directory and you change the name or the format. Notice if you ls, you get a text. If you do rm, that's for remove. It's a very dangerous command from the command line. We'll talk more about that as the semester goes along. And notice after you remove that file, ls, it's there. It's destroyed. It's not deleted. It's gone. When you hit the echo command with 1 greater than caret, it creates a new file called hello.txt and adds something to it. And the cat command shows you what's in it. cd ... goes back a directory, and you saw we already did the ls command. rm-r is go ahead and remove that folder, or recursive actually, you're removing a folder and anything that's in it. And then if you type in history, it'll show you the last 10 or X number of commands that are in there. So basically what you need to do, open up the terminal, go ahead and do each of these commands, and then, one sentence description of what each of these commands do. I'm going to use them a lot throughout the semester. And on to the next one. What happens if you press the up arrow key, the down arrow key? Well, if you go up arrow key, it'll actually go through your history, the commands in order of the last command going on up. Down arrow, it depends. If you are in the middle of that history, you'll go down one in the history, or if you're at the end, it'll do nothing. So up arrow gives you your last command, very useful, and yeah, pretty simple. Let's go ahead and write about that there. See, I don't even know you have to write about that. That's a pretty easy one. You do it and you learn it. Okay, so most shells support file command expansion, and that's a fancy way of saying that, okay, I have these files. Instead of having to spell the whole thing out, you can use unique letter combinations and hit the tab and it'll autocomplete. So notice I did touch, I had to type xxxx.txt, but when I rm'd, I just typed x, hit the tab, it completed it for me. Pretty simple. So hitting the tab does autocomplete. If there are a number of choices for autocomplete, then you're going to get a number of choices showing up. Okay, now we're going to jump out of VS Code into a browser window. Now I'm in Edge, and this is very busy and noisy when you click inspect and then click on the console down on the bottom part, but just go down to the bottom, you see where I'm typing stuff, right? So basically what the console is doing is allowing you to execute commands. 1 + 1 gives you 2. 2 divided by 3 gives you a floating point of 0.666 all the way down. Hello plus there is concatenation with 2 different kind of quotes, and you'll notice there's no space. Doesn't add it automatically. You have to put it in there if you want to. Now, this next one is you're basically creating an object, and you'll see it if you type it in correctly as opposed to what I've been doing. Put the quotes around it. It's a text item, and then there's a number. So your first element is going to be A, and a value is going to be 1. Second element is going to be B, and a value 1. And notice what I did was I put a comma in there, so I got to go fix that. Make it a colon. Now hit enter, and then expand that little arrow, and it shows you that right below where you typed it. Sorry, go ahead and click on that. And you'll see it says it's an object type. A is 1 value, B has 2 value. Then you're creating an array by putting in the square brackets, 1, 2, 3. If you expand that out, it says the 0th element is 1, the first element is 2, the second element is 3. That's going to be an important concept we go over later. And then finally, console.log is a very simple common tool that you use for troubleshooting. You put in your code, you want to see if something is at like a breakpoint, make sure something's happening. You can put a console.log and see it right out to the console when you are debugging your code or just following along to make sure everything's working well. So real quickly, just summarize what you did there. Top line added, second line divided, third line concatenated, fourth line created objects, fifth line array, last one was console log. Okay, on to step 5, and this one is a mess. So the messy part of this is after you create the server.js. In the bullet instructions, when it has you launch the node server and stuff like that, it gets confusing on where you are and what you should be doing. So we're going to have to actually fix this, but as I mentioned on Discord, I can't fix it without kicking everyone out who's already started doing the assignment. So we'll talk about it on Wednesday. Anyway, I want to check out my node version. Just to prove, you saw it in the previous video, I installed Node, no big deal. And then what it's going to have you do is it's going to have you create a file called server.js. So what you want to do is you want to, well, again, follow the instruction. It has you go back to the repo directory, not in lab 1, and then go ahead and do an npm node package manager. That's what it stands for. And you're going to install the express package, and then you're going to install the minimus packages. And go ahead and do a quick DuckDuckGo, see what those are for. We'll talk about it more in class. If you are on the actual terminal as opposed to inside the Mac terminal, you might have to sudo. Now what you're going to do is you're going to create a new file, and notice you're still in the item 352 repo directory, not lab 1. Create a new file called server.js. So you just hit the new file tab and then start typing in the words server.js. Now, mind you, I could have done this from the command line. I'll show you how to do that in class. I mean, you saw a little bit of how I would do it already with touch and echo and stuff, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to use VI. We're just going to go ahead and add a folder. New file called server.js, and notice VS Code identifies that it's JavaScript, puts a little JS in there so that way it will do the identification of the fields related to JavaScript, which you will see in a second, because once you copy the material from the website and paste it into the file, you'll notice that it puts it into like a color-coded format related to what different components are. Okay, so great. Go ahead and save that. That was my dog, by the way. Now what we're going to do is we're going to skip the rest of all of the bullets down below, and we're going to do it live in class. So I'm just going to skip to the next step here right about now. Okay, we're on to part 6, and this one's actually pretty easy. All we really need to do is have our CyberDuck installed, which we did in an earlier video. So I'm going to go ahead and launch CyberDuck. Now what you can do is go ahead and make a new connection up on the top menu, but instead we're going to create one and save one. First thing we're going to do is change the protocol to Secure File Transfer Protocol, SFTP, and we're going to have the URL be itm.tac.vm.hawaii.edu, and very important, the port number is 8615. The username is going to be ITM 352 student, and the password is bang student bang, and the bangs are exclamation points. So bang student bang, all lowercase. Then in the path, go ahead and put ITM 352 student, and that's going to be the directory it's going to take us to after we go ahead and log in. So now once you're done with that, you go ahead and close it out. It should save it automatically. Everything in there looks pretty good. Go ahead and hit the little red close button, and then just basically double click it, and it's reaching out to the server and goes, do you trust this server? Yeah, you're going to trust it. And bam, you're in the server. Now we have a section called Sal, and these are a bunch of files that were left over. That's perfectly fine. What I'm going to do now is launch a Finder window, and this is all drag and drop stuff. So I'm going to launch a Finder window, find my Sal hello HTML, which is under the lab 1 directory, or under static because I did some stuff earlier. Just going to drag it over to section Sal and allow it to go transfer the file, and you'll notice the file shows up. But what does this really mean? What we did was we transferred the file from the local computer to a web server hosted at University of Hawaii. So I'm going to put in the file name in the URL, same address, and now instead of this rendering from my hard drive, whoops, I forgot section Sal, I apologize. So it's ITM 352 student section underscore sal / the name of the file. Go ahead, hit enter, and there is my fancy web page. This is Sal. So that was really it. The whole point of this was to show you how to use CyberDuck to connect into the server, because you're going to be uploading stuff throughout the semester to this server. So go ahead, and this is a nebulous question. Go ahead and look on ChatGPT, whatever discussions we've had in your readings, to come up with a simple answer to how do you make websites. It's a very nebulous question, but we've actually covered everything in here. But make sure it makes sense. If you're going to use something like ChatGPT or a random guess on the web, make sure that creating a website as you have it there actually does make sense. Okay, next question was, what's the difference between a local and a global web server? What do you think it is? It's the local web server is the one that's running on your computer. The global web server is like what we just used at Scheidler. And then how do web servers work with VS Code? Well, in this particular case, when we're using it local, we're updating a file directly from VS Code. It updates the web page automatically, but if we're going to go to a remote server, we updated VS Code and then transfer it over. Anyway, there it is. That's lab 1. We'll talk more in class. Aloha.